I'll tell you something about living alone in the mountains. Most nights it's so quiet you can hear your own heartbeat. The wind runs its fingers through the pines. The lake down below breathes with the moonlight and the crackle of firewood. In the hearth is the only reminder that you're not completely swallowed by the dark. That's the life I chose, and it suited me just fine. But one night, that silence was shattered in the most absurd, maddening way you could imagine. Not by a bear on the porch or a wolf howling in the ridge, but by fists pounding on my cabin. From midnight sharp, like they had a right to be there. At first I froze, listening to the echo through the timber. Then came a voice, sharp and entitled, "Open up. This is Cynthia from the HOA board, and I demand entry. Hand over your cabin key immediately." Now maybe you've had a run-in with an HOA before. They like their rules, their fines, their meetings about what shade of beige is allowed for a mailbox. But this wasn't the suburbs. This was the backwoods. The fact that Cynthia had driven out here at midnight in the pouring rain, demanding my house key, told me I wasn't dealing with just another nosy neighbor. This was someone who thought she held power and thought she could enforce it anywhere she went. I kept quiet at first, hand drifting to the hunting rifle leaning by the doorframe. It's not about being trigger-happy. It's about living where cougars roam and knowing you need to be ready for whatever comes scratching. When I finally cracked the door an inch, lantern in hand, there she was, hair plastered with rain, clutching a clipboard like it was a badge of honor, heels sinking in the mud like she'd wandered out of a board meeting straight into a storm. "Sir," she snapped, narrowing her eyes, "the HOA requires master keys for all properties within its jurisdiction. Refusal will result in fines and legal action." I couldn't help but let out a bitter chuckle. "Lady, this cabin isn't under your jurisdiction. It's private land, been in my family for 3 generations. You've got no authority here, and even if you did, I wouldn't hand you a key." Her jaw tightened and she leaned closer, dripping rain onto the porch boards. "You'll regret that attitude. I'll have you removed if I must." That was the breaking point. I opened the door wider, lantern light catching the rifle beside me, and set it low and steady. "You're not stepping." One boot inside. "Turn around and leave now." For just a moment I saw it, fear flickering across her face, but pride smothered it, and as she retreated into the storm, she hissed, "This isn't over." And she meant it. I barely slept that night. Her words clung to me like smoke in the rafters. By morning, though, the mountain looked innocent again, mist curling over the lake, birds calling, coffee steaming in my mug. Peaceful on the surface, but I knew it was just the eye of a storm. Sure enough, by mid-morning, tires crunched on the gravel. A shiny black SUV crawled up the drive, chrome gleaming like it had no business in the mud. Cynthia climbed out, looking refreshed, crisp clothes, hair blown dry like the night before hadn't even happened. But she wasn't alone. 2 men followed, clipboards in hand, polos tucked tight like they'd been dragged out of some office park. She strutted up to the porch and declared, "We've come back to resolve this matter. Hand over the key and we'll spare you the fines." I leaned against the railing, dog at my feet, rifle still propped by the door. "You brought backup? What are they going to do, measure my chimney?" The men shifted nervously, but Cynthia held her ground. "These are compliance officers. If you refuse again, the board will escalate." "Lady," I said, voice sharper now, "this land doesn't belong to your board. My grandfather built this cabin before your HOA even existed. You're barking up the wrong tree." Her nostrils flared. "Every property within our boundary lines is subject—" "Boundary lines," I cut in. "You drew lines on a map and decided the mountain was yours. This cabin sits outside your precious subdivision." The men whispered to each other, clearly uncomfortable, but Cynthia silenced them with a glare. She stepped closer, lowered her voice, and spat, "Give me the key or the fines will crush you." I picked up the rifle, not raising it, just letting the lantern light catch on the steel. "You've got until the count of 3 to get off my land." Her face drained white, but before I even said 2, the men had her by the arms, tugging, her back toward the SUV. She screamed over her shoulder. The HOA always wins as they vanished down the drive. That should have been the end of it, but I knew better. Folks like Cynthia don't back down, they double down. 2 mornings later, I spotted trucks idling near the trailhead, men in reflective vests setting up tripods and pointing instruments toward my cabin. I marched down, rifle slung on my shoulder, and asked what they thought they were doing. One man straightened his clipboard and said casually, "Morning. We're here on behalf of the HOA, conducting a boundary assessment. Routine procedure." Routine. "For property you don't own," I shot back. He hesitated, then tried again. "The HOA says this cabin falls under their authority. We've got paperwork." "Paperwork means nothing out here," I told him. "Unless you've got a county deed with my name on it, you're trespassing." His jaw stiffened. "We'll have to report noncompliance." I stepped closer, voice low but sharp. "Report it to whoever you want. Just make sure you're off my land before I finish counting." They didn't wait to hear me start. Engines roared, trucks kicked up dust, and by the time the echoes faded, the mountain was mine again. But the peace didn't last. That evening, the landline rang, rare enough that it raised the hair on my arms. "This is Harold Crane, HOA president," a voice said, smooth and practiced. "We've received reports of your hostility toward compliance officers. Consider this your final warning. Cooperate, or we'll escalate legally." I let the silence hang, then answered, calm as stone. "Harold, tell Cynthia and your board. I don't answer to you. Step foot here again, and you'll be trespassing, end of story." And I hung up, but deep down I knew it wasn't the end. The very next night, the storm rolled back in. Rain hammered the roof, thunder shook the valley. I sat by the fire, rifle across my lap, dog curled at my feet, waiting. And sure enough, headlights cut through the trees. 3 SUVs crawling slow, engines growling like predators. I counted 7 people when the doors swung open. Cynthia with her umbrella snapping in the wind, Harold Crane puffed up beside her, and 6 men with clipboards, flashlights, radios. They marched up the path like they were storming a fortress. I opened the door before they could knock. "This ends tonight," I said over the storm. Cynthia smirked, eyes wild. "Finally, the board is here to enforce compliance. Hand over your key, or we'll remove you." I laughed, low and steady. "Remove me? You've forgotten where you are. This isn't your subdivision. This is wilderness, my family's land, and you're trespassing." Harold lifted a folder in the air. "We have documents. Paper won't protect you when you cross the wrong boundary." I cut him off, rifle glinting in the lightning. The men behind him froze, their clipboards suddenly useless. But Cynthia shouted, "You're a danger to the community. If you won't comply, law enforcement will make you." "Good," I said, voice calm even as the rain pelted us. "Because I already called them." Her face cracked, panic flickering. And then the sirens came, faint at first, then rising, red and blue lights cutting through the storm. "You said they wouldn't come," she screamed at Harold, eyes wide, with betrayal. The deputies pulled up, hats dripping, flashlights slicing through the night. The lead one barked, "Everyone stay right where you are." Cynthia tried to recover, waving her clipboard. "Officer, this man is violating HOA rules. He's armed and threatening us." The deputy's gaze swept over me, then back to her. His voice was sharp as steel. "Ma'am, this property is outside HOA jurisdiction. You and your group are trespassing. Step away now." Her face drained pale. Harold stammered about community rights, but the deputy cut him off. "You organized an unlawful attempt to seize access to a private home. That's criminal trespass and harassment." Cynthia's composure broke, her voice cracking. "You can't arrest me. I was protecting the community." The deputy didn't flinch. "Community doesn't mean control. Turn around. Hands where I can see them." The cuffs clicked, cold and final. The men shuffled nervously, realizing they'd followed the wrong leader. One muttered, "I told you this was a bad idea." By dawn, the SUVs were gone, the storm had passed, and the mountain was quiet again. I stood on the porch with my dog, rifle leaning against the wall, watching the lake glisten gold under the rising sun. The lead deputy tipped his hat before leaving. "Some folks think power comes from paperwork," he said. "Out here it comes, from knowing what's yours and protecting it." I nodded, eyes on the horizon. Cynthia and her HOA had learned the hard way. The mountain answers to no one but itself, and neither do I. So tell me, if someone like Cynthia showed up at your door demanding your house key, would you stand your ground, or would you hand it over to avoid the fight? I want to hear your thoughts. Drop them in the comments, hit like if this story had you on edge, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next unbelievable real-life showdown.